Hello, this is ASMR Vibes. Welcome back to another video. Now, I just got done beating Bloodstained Curse of the Moon and thought that I would just provide you guys with my impressions on the game. Um, Now, I thought about for showing footage of this to just create a new character, but I didn't want any of even the beginning cutscenes to show that off just in case someone was interested in the game. So instead, what I did was I removed all of my gear, so you're not going to see any of the, things that you might see later in the game. And then I just equipped some random spear. But enough back and forth. My thoughts on the game. You know, I had a really fun time with this game. When I was growing up in my early teens, I played a lot of the Castlevania games on the DS. I think specifically the one I played was Dawn of Sorrow. I think that's the first one that came out on the DS, and I never had the patience in my earlier years to beat those games, but I always had a lot of fun with them. Um, so this is, funny enough, the first Castlevania game that I beat. But while I had a really fun time with it, I also admit that I, at times, was very frustrated. From what I read online, some people were able to beat this game very easily. Um, they would have like a certain weapon that they would craft, or maybe a certain you have these they're not called spells, they're called shards that the character here absorbs, um, and they would just kind of go through the game that way. I was able to do that for the most part without spoiling anything. I had a really difficult time with the end game boss. Um, and that I think it took me like 3 hours. I got so close to taking that boss out, and every time I thought I was getting there, I couldn't make the cut. So I had to do research into like a better weapon to equip. I had a sword that it was okay, but there's another sword in the game that is just really effective. So I had to find out how to craft that. So needless to say, enough rambling. I spent a lot of time looking for that, um, and then crafting. There's other things that you craft in the game that I don't recall being in those Castlevania games. One of which you get to prepare food, and it has various buffs. So there is sort of an incentive to spend time um, crafting and preparing. And that isn't one of my preferred things to do in a game. To craft and prepare and assemble items. I would rather um, just kind of run across these items as I'm playing the game rather than go hunt for them. But I will admit that towards the end of the game, when I started doing side quests and preparing the various meals, crafting items, I actually did have quite a bit of fun with it. So overall, this is probably one of my better games of 2020 so far. Anyways, if you watched my previous video on Resident Evil 7, two very different games, but they both scratch a different itch. Yeah, great experience. I think the graphics are great. I know some people had an issue with that, and the developer, I haven't read much into it, but I guess the developer didn't. Well, to back up, this was all funded through Kickstarter, and there were some promises that were made that weren't really fulfilled. And I have a Switch, and I bought this game on my Switch as well, and it doesn't look nearly as good as it does on the PC, or any other system for that matter. They have since patched it, but a lot of, like, if you see the water here, like the shimmering, effect. It's just not there on the Switch. It's a pared back experience. But that being said, oh, and the frame rates at 30 frames, so that doesn't help matters either. Um, but all in all, I played maybe a few hours on the Switch. It's bearable, but I would recommend any other system if you're able to. Um, but yeah, back to my thoughts on the game. Graphics are great. I really, really loved the audio. The music, the soundtrack was, spectacular. It reminded me of, so I lied a little bit. I did play a Castlevania on the PS1, but it was very brief and I was very young, so I don't remember much. But I do remember the soundtrack, and there were specific areas in this game that reminded me of the soundtrack from the PS1 game, so that was really cool. Specifically, you're like in these caverns or something, and that's probably my most memorable song. Yeah, just great, great stuff. Presentation I thought was very good. No, no complaints here. There's a lot to master here. You really have to learn how to take advantage of the abilities that you gain as you play the game. It's not something that you can just you do have a level. You level up and progress in the game, but some bosses require precision. So if you don't, know what you're doing on a particular boss, if you don't have their pattern picked up, then you're probably not gonna win the battle. Let me get a drink here, a coffee. A moment. All right. Yeah, if you don't know the patterns of these bosses, you're probably not gonna win the battle. There are potions, and I had mentioned earlier, you can prepare meals, and both of those are reliable options to heal your character. But as far as potions go, you can only carry so many in your inventory. And if you're anything like me, who I largely ignored preparing meals, which I recommend you don't do what I did. But if you ignore it like I did, then you're really just relying on potions to heal yourself. So I suppose in a sense, I kind of made the game a little more difficult than I should have. But there were definitely some walls that I hit on two specific bosses. One was the end boss, as mentioned, and the other, I think he may have been the second boss. I remember playing this because I started playing it on my Switch, and I remember playing, and I immediately died from the first boss in this, on this map, this ship here. And I was pretty upset because I didn't find a save point, so I had to start completely over. So I actually stopped playing this game for probably about a month because I didn't want to have to, repeat it. But that seems to be, for me anyways, a common theme in this game. It's definitely a risk reward. And that's some of the fun of it though too, to be fair. You might uncover a new area because let's just say you learn a new ability, and that area is very difficult in comparison to your level and your gear. So you might have a really hard time making it to a save point or a save room, as it were, in that area. So as an example here, I'll show you, we're right next to a save point. So let's say this area was very difficult for us. You can duck in here, save the game, and you'll heal back to 100%. So that is very handy. But if you can't get to that save in time, and you don't have this waystone item that'll teleport you back, you're kind of just out of luck. So there, there's definitely, like I mentioned, a risk reward. Um, so I had a few frustrating times where I would die, um, and maybe I was playing for an hour and or 45 minutes, and I'd lose all that work. Very upsetting. So even towards the end of the game, I was crafting, uh, like I mentioned, to beat that end game boss, and you'd think I would be, you know, really strong, but I went to a sort of late game area, and there's a few side bosses that you don't have to defeat in this game, and I accidentally went into one of those rooms, and I died and lost a bunch of work. So it was frustrating, but I would say it borders on that line. It was still fair, and I should have been more careful in where I was wandering. But yeah, so presentation, I think I think it handled itself very well. I enjoyed the story quite a bit. For those of you that don't know, the developer, he was previously with Konami, and they published the Castlevania games. The developer was, and he left Konami. I don't recall when, but he made Bloodstained. I think it's Ritual of the Night. I might be mixing them up. And then that was the 8-bit game that he made, which I haven't played yet. So let me know if you think I should play that and possibly record a video. I'd be happy to do so. And then he made this game to sort of be a spiritual successor because he doesn't have the rights to the game, or to the Castlevania games. But nevertheless, the story kind of parallels, or like as closely as possible mirrors Dracula and the castle specifically, as much as possible. I think without maybe like infringing, or I don't know, getting a lawsuit against them or something. But yeah, story's great. I didn't have an issue with it. I didn't get like confused, or it's pretty straightforward, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's there's nothing like out of the ordinary that's gonna confuse you. There is one thing that I had a gripe with. I want to say about in the middle of the game, you have you have a boss that you can go after and kill. But in doing so, you end up with a bad ending, and that was kind of frustrating because it's just the way the map was set up. It was sort of like logically your next point to go would be to go fight this boss, at least where I was, and in doing so you get a game over, and well, you get actually a pretty long cutscene and then a game over, and you have to load back. Well, hopefully you saved, and didn't lose once again 30 minutes of work. So there's definitely some older elements, I guess I'd say, to this game, but it's forgivable in the grand scheme of things, and I think it holds up pretty well. I would like to know what you guys thought of the game. This was going to be just a quicker video, just because I just beat the game a few hours ago. Like I said, this would definitely be in my top 3 so far for 2020, but don't forget, leave a like, dislike, or comment, and comment. Let me know if you guys have played it. Let me know what you think of the game, if you've beat it yet. I'm just curious to know. Or maybe you haven't played it and you're kind of thinking about picking it up. If you have a Switch, and that's your only console, maybe you don't have a decent computer, although I would imagine most computers can run this. I would say the Switch version is serviceable after having played both versions, but I'd highly recommend at least getting it on a PS4 or Xbox. to get the best experience, because you will be getting 60 frames on the console version where you're only getting 30 with the Switch. But it has been patched, so from my understanding, at least that 30 is locked. And I thought they fixed the pacing too, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, let me know what you guys either think about the game, or if you're thinking about picking it up. I'd love to hear in the comments. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.